Okay, thank you all for attending today. I'm going to call to order the special meeting of the city's advisory committee. I'm Keith Simons, I'm the LAFCO executive officer, and I will be serving as your moderator for this biennial meeting. A biennial meeting that is going to have a hard stop no matter what at 12:30. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and conduct roll call. And I believe we even have the city manager, Swan Beach, lurking behind me. We have a seat there. And so there may be individuals or more than one individual representing each city. So that said, when we do roll call, we're going to do it by city name. If there's more than one person per particular city, please go ahead and both identify your presence here, and then with the voting member, just make that distinction. Again, I'm not sure if that applies today, but it could. So with that, we're going to have Erica Sala start us off with roll call.
Carlsbad? Here. Pass. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Chula Vista?
Chula Vista.
Tiffany? Coronado?
Here, Tina Friend, City Manager.
Del Mar?
Here, Clem Brown, Assistant City Manager.
El Cajon? Absent. Encinitas? Is absent. Escondido?
Chris McKinney, here.
Imperial Beach?
Tyler Coles, here.
City of La Mesa is absent. Lemon Grove, absent. National City, Oceanside,
Jonathan Borrego, here.
Poway,
Chris Hazeltine, here.
San Diego,
Yeah, Adrian Green, Director of Government Affairs, here.
San Marcos, absent. Santee,
Michael Coyne, present.
Solana Beach,
Greg Wade, City Manager, here.
Vista, absent. So there is a quorum with 12 cities represented.
Thank you, Erica. So I'm going to ask fellow Blair High School alum Greg Wade from Solana Beach to do the pledge of allegiance first.
Right hand over your heart. Ready to begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. And so in terms of agenda review, certainly the main item of discussion today is going to be a presentation from LAFCO staff on our review of these detachment proposals up in North County that directly or at least indirectly certainly all impact the 18 cities here in San Diego County. So that is the main item. We also have a brief discussion on our proposed budget and work plan at LAFCO for the upcoming fiscal year. A couple of procedural notes. We are being live streamed right now, and in doing so, we do have the capability for those who are listening and watching online to take comments in real time. We just ask those who may be interested in providing comments, whether it be directly by video or by email, if you go ahead and reference the instructions that we've provided on the cover page to the agenda itself. But no changes per se to the agenda as presented. So for the benefit of time, I'm going to go out of order and move committee member reports to the back end of the agenda and jump right into our business items. The first being approval of meeting minutes for the October 27th meeting. Keep in mind, you're representing your agency. So even if you weren't here, we have no doubt someone in your holistic organization has either was here on October or at least reviewed the video. So a motion to approve and a second would be most appreciated.
I'll offer the motion.
Thank you, John.
Second.
Thank you, Roberto. So we have a motion to approve as presented from Oceanside and National City. We can go ahead with a simple majority call. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Noes? Any abstain? Wonderful. Motion passes unanimously. So here is 4B. This is the update on the proposed Rainbow Municipal Water District and Fall River Public Utility Districts reorganization specific to making a change to wholesale water service. We have a team effort for you today, committee. Priscilla Mumpower is going to lead the presentation, but we also have a couple of consultants with us today. We have Chris Kate and also Adam Wilson. They have both participated in the document that you have before you. And just to round out, let me just also introduce the rest of the LAFCO staff. Erica Sellin, Michaela Peters, who knew, and then we do have Carol Neiman, and then legal counsel, deputy petition counsel, Alex Garrison. And so in the spirit of a team report, I'm going to ask Priscilla to start us off. And again, Adam and Chris, and perhaps Alex, be ready in the bullpen to help out. So with that, Priscilla.
Good morning, advisory committee members. Priscilla Mumpower, analyst with San Diego County LAFCO and project manager on these proposals before you today. Before the committee is a complete draft report on two reorganization proposals filed almost 3 years ago from Fall River Public Utility District and Rainbow Municipal Water District, and done so at the unanimous direction of their respective governing boards. The draft report administratively bundles the two proposals together with the consent of the applicants, given the parallel interests of these agencies to concurrently A, detach from the County Water Authority, and B, annex into the Eastern Municipal Water District. The draft report today is being presented with three specific purposes and is shown on the next slide. So today you'll hear directly on the topics LAFCO staff believes warrant commission attention in making informed decisions on the proposals. You'll also today hear directly from LAFCO staff on its analysis of these topics, including critical assumptions like how we assess significant or reliable. Today also, importantly, provides a forum for the committee to discuss the draft report, seek clarifications, and should you collectively choose, make specific requests and or recommendations to the commission in step with a final report making its way to the dais in June. Now, a couple important prefaces to taking in the draft report today. First, the draft report is complete with respect to including analysis of all topics LAFCO staff believes are merited under state statute, as well as local policy, less any recommendations. Recommendations will be added in the final version, and only after we've met our commitment to 1, present this to the Special Districts Advisory Committee, check as of this morning. 2, present this to the city's advisory committee, as we are all here today, as well as presenting this to the ad hoc committee, which was formed specific to the reorganization proposals in April. Second, the draft report does include 3 options that LAFCO staff believes represent one of 3 reasonable outcomes that sync to different possible commission policy preferences and or priorities. It would be reasonable to assume the final recommendation from LAFCO staff will in all probability be one of these specific options. Third, and for the benefit of being clear on expectations, While we may revise what's already in the draft report and possibly refine the options as merited, we don't anticipate tackling any new topics. Staff believes we've exhausted the topics meriting attention on our end and will await further direction once the items are on the dais. These prefaces aside, and for the benefit of drilling down on the topics we anticipate generating the most discussion and in some cases, disagreement, I'm going to go ahead and focus the presentation on 18 ancillary items as shown on the next two slides. Now, we've addressed these in the draft report for our policy L107 that directs staff to disclose and evaluate any known jurisdictional and/or policy disputes. Now, all of these have merit for the committee's attention. So in short order, I'm going to summarize each. Beginning with number 1 and number 2 on the screen, specific to Met's position on the detachments and Sandag's position on the detachments. Met has remained agnostic to the reorganization proposals and marked by a letter submitted to LAFCO staff in September of 2020. Sandag has not submitted comments to LAFCO with respect to the proposed detachments. As such, staff believes it's reasonable to assume there are no direct conflicts tied to the detachments with respect to both Met and Sandag. With respect to financial differences between roll-offs and detachment, the ad hoc committee formed for these reorganization proposals tasked a separate working group to independently address this topic and specifically the key differences between roll-off and detachment, and with regard to the financial impacts to the County Water Authority. The working group concluded the impacts of detachment and roll-off are different in that an agency that rolls off will still be a member agency of the San Diego County Water Authority and will be contributing to future cost increases and rates set by the County Water Authority Board. In contrast, with respect to a detachment, once completed means that a member agency is no longer a member agency of the San Diego County Water Authority and will not be contributing to future costs. That is unless an exit fee is conditioned by LAFCO for a certain period of time. Further, the working group recommended that the revenue impacts of a roll-off will be further assessed, or should be further assessed, as part of the municipal service review on the San Diego County Water Authority. With respect to the detachment's impact on the County Water Authority's credit rating. So Standard & Poor's, given their own observations on the topic, staff believes it's reasonable to assume that the detachments will have an impact on the County Water Authority's credit rating. However, we believe the impact would be less than significant, given one, there were several other factors and variables that were listed within their reports that would be contributing to their rating. And two, the impact focuses on financial considerations, which presumably would be controlled or mitigated via a conditioned exit fee. With respect to the financial impacts from detachments. Now, both applicants and the County Water Authority have submitted their own estimates of financial impacts to the consultant retained by LAFCO, Dr. Michael Hanneman. Now, in his final report, Dr. Hanneman calculates a total net revenue loss to the County Water Authority and by extension, its member agencies at $12.6 million each year over the first 10 years or in the short run. He separately calculates 10.9 million annually after the 10th year or in the long run. LAFCO staff proceeded to calculate the individual cost impacts for the remaining member agencies and their ratepayers using equivalent meter units, and done so using the $12.6 million figure. In doing so, staff estimates the remaining member agencies' ratepayers would experience an average increase in their water bills of $26.41 annually and $2.20 monthly. Now, these numbers, of course, vary across all member agencies. So, as a baseline, we have the City of San Diego, which is the largest member agency of the County Water Authority. Staff estimates that their ratepayers will experience an annual increase of $12.60 and a monthly increase of $1.05. In contrast, we have the Yuma Municipal Water District, which is the smallest member agency of the County Water Authority. Staff estimates that they will experience an annual increase of $224.56 and $18.71 monthly. Now, a breakdown of all impacts to member agencies is within the report. So now that we understand the financial impacts, or at least the numbers, how do we assess the significance of these financial impacts on both the County Water Authority and its ratepayers? LAFCO staff believes assessing the overall significance on the calculated financial impacts relative to inflation serves as a reasonable and certain measurement for the purpose of this analysis. So, staff focused in on a one-year inflation rate rather than a multi-year inflation rate, and done so to align with Dr. Hannigan's one-year analysis. Now, the current one-year inflation rate sits at 6.4%. Staff's analysis then focused in on two separate measurements. So one, the annual net revenue impact to the County Water Authority at $12.58 million represents 4.4% of the County Water Authority's 2023 gross water sales revenue. Two, average annual ratepayer impacts among member agencies of $26.41 represents a 3.6% increase in ratepayer charges. So notably, a 4.4% impact to the County Water Authority and a 3.6% impact to ratepayers are below the 6.4% one-year inflation rate, and therefore reasonably considered to be less than significant. Now, despite reaching this conclusion, LAFCO believes there is still justification to apply exit fees, which remains warranted. So now that we've established the financial impacts, let's discuss the merits and options to imposing exit fees and/or other payments on these applicants. LAFCO staff believes it is sufficiently reasonable to require exit fees on the applicants should the detachments proceed. This conclusion aligns with the uniformly accepted acknowledgement from all sides, although with different estimates, that the detachment will result in unavoidable financial impacts to the County Water Authority. With respect to options, LAFCO staff believes the focus on the exit fee should be on mitigating the annual net revenue losses. Now, while member agencies have requested LAFCO impose exit fees, including dedicated payments over a longer period for their proportionate share of outstanding long-term debt obligations, this appears impractical and unreasonable. Staff believes any exit fees set to also recover outstanding debt over the same time period would appear as double counting. So now that we've established the exit fee, how do we determine or identify the appropriate length of this exit fee? Dr. Hanneman advised LAFCO and the ad hoc committee that a reasonable length to apply an exit fee was 3 to 10 years. He further advised that an exit fee period of more than 10 years would be unreasonable. So drawing from this parameter, it appears 5 years is a good and reasonable benchmark. Now, this is further supported by the ad hoc working group, who noted that future cost allocations are best predicted using a 5-year period. We also want to note that urban water management plans set to support long-term resources and LAFCO's municipal service reviews are similarly prepared every 5 years. Moving on to number 9 on the screen. So LAFCO's authority to require exit fees and balancing or assessing the County Water Authority Act with the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act. While the applicants have been consistent in their comments that the County Water Authority Act does not contemplate the imposition of exit fees, and instead only provides the continued payment of property taxes to cover any remaining debts, LAFCO staff acknowledges this to be true, however, does not believe that this precludes LAFCO from its authority in statute to condition approval on the payment of an exit fee. Moving on to number 10. So how do we determine if we should discount exit fees? The topic of the ESP North County pump station has been brought up throughout these meetings and through this process. And so this topic was assessed and discussed at length by the working group formed by the ad hoc committee. The working group identified $21 million budgeted by the County Water Authority in 2010. The County Water Authority separately referenced a cost of $40 million in a September 2020 response to LAFCO. In reviewing both of these figures, staff believes that the discount of $21 million identified by the working group would be reasonable. So now number 11 and 12 on the screen. So what are the risks to the applicants in consideration of the greater reliance on the Bay Delta, as well as changes to MET's wholesale rates? Dr. Hanneman advised that there are potential risks to applicants and their ratepayers with respect to increased reliance on the Bay Delta. However, he specifically concludes that while the applicants may face challenges in switching wholesale suppliers, the challenge ultimately rests in paying a higher price than they had anticipated to get by in a drought, rather than that of running out of water. Notably, he asserts the applicants are taking a financial gamble. Now, looking at detachment's impact on the County Water Authority's voting power at MET. If the applicant service areas are detached from the County Water Authority, the weight of the authority's vote will be reduced by 1,021 votes. And the weight of Eastern's vote will be correspondingly increased. This would substantively result in a 0.3% transfer of voting power at MET from the County Water Authority to Eastern. So how do we assess the significance of this 0.3%? LAFCO staff reviewed the last 900 plus votes in the last 10 years. And within this period, there have only been 3 votes in which the decision was within the margin of voting rights of 0.3%, which would be shifted. One of these votes involved the appointment of the current MET GM, which creates an outlier in assessing the significance associated with the vote transfer, given the possibility of repeating in the future, with the aid of approving these attachments. Now, in assessing the effect on other projects, such as the pure water and other reuse projects, staff believes that the proposed reorganization does not appear to have any material impacts to these projects, such as the City of San Diego's Pure Water Project or the Pure Water Oceanside or East County Advanced Water Purification projects. With respect to number 15, emergency supplies during a catastrophic event. LAFCO staff believes MET's existing emergency response plan of restoring service within 14 days, paired with Eastern Municipal Water District's ability to continue service during an emergency, provides sufficient assurances that risks are reasonably controlled. LAFCO would like to also separately note that Rainbow and Fallbrook have a combined local water storage of over 2,000 acre-feet. This is equivalent to accommodating 73 days of average day demands without recharge. This provides additional assurance of the continued service to their ratepayers during an emergency. Number 16 on the screen. Effective stipulated CEQA settlements on LAFCO. Staff maintains that there is no material impact on the Commission's decision-making and related discretion under CEQA, given LAFCO is not a party to the stipulated judgments. Accordingly, and as advised by Commission Counsel, LAFCO is not bound by these stipulated judgments. Now, determining the affected territory for election purposes. Staff is advised by Commission Counsel maintains that an election held within the affected territory may be held. However, expanding the election to include all voters within the County Water Authority is not an option, given the County Water Authority requesting non-district status under CKH and the subsequent guidance provided under the County Water Authority's Principal Act. The Commission, however, may choose to expand the election to include voters within the jurisdictional boundary of Eastern Municipal Water District. Lastly, what role does agriculture have in the proposals as well as LAFCO's decision-making? So a central premise to the applicant's detachment proposals involves providing economic relief to their agricultural customers. And this is done so by securing less expensive water supplies from Eastern Municipal Water District. The economic relief ties to the approximate 26% cost savings in the current all-in acre-foot charge between the County Water Authority and Eastern Municipal Water District. This said, the cost saving is significant for both applicants. Currently, agriculture represents 36% of all retail sales in Fallbrook and 65% of all retail sales in Rainbow. Now, although independent, LAFCO is expected in statute to encourage planned, well-ordered, efficient urban development patterns, while concurrently providing for the preservation of agriculture and open space lands. This includes specific consideration of the effects that jurisdictional changes will have on agriculture. Now, relatedly, San Diego LAFCO recently updated its own implementing policies relevant to preserving agriculture in September of 2020. Now, among other items, it was added in a section to enhance agriculture in San Diego County. As such, staff believes it's reasonable due to the substantive tie in both state statute and local policy to treat agriculture as a unique and or protected group, and in doing so make special accommodations as the Commission may deem appropriate. So with that summary of the draft agenda report committee, I conclude my presentation. Myself, Keen, Adam, Chris are all here to take questions. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right. So, thank you, Priscilla. So, just an observation or comment on my end before we hear from a couple of public speakers, and we're going to turn it all to this dais for some feedback, discussion. And if you want, perhaps even offer up a formal request or even a recommendation to the commission. Keep in mind, as a parenthetical comment, you've been established to advise the commission. So while you may generally be oriented to support staff, there is always the potential you may want to directly provide comments to the commission. This is the vehicle certainly to do so. But as Priscilla mentioned, so we've evaluated what we think exhaustively, all of the material items under statute and policy that one would want to think about in order to make an informed decision. And in doing so, we've identified, as mentioned, these three options. And I just want to quickly touch on what these three options are, because as mentioned by Priscilla, it is certainly a reasonable chance that when we hit final on this report, staff is going to tie its hitch to one of these in our recommendation. So what we identify as option X, which would be, okay, commission, let's go ahead and approve this proposal. Let's include an exit fee at about $63 million. Let's have that exit fee paid out over a 5-year period. Less this $21 million discount that we have identified relative to savings to the water authority, at least in our estimate, of not having to go forward with this pump station to serve these two jurisdictions going forward. So the net impact would be about $8.3 million to both, or collectively among the two agencies for a period of 5 years. And certainly the core policy benefit, should this be the commission's preference, would be to support and actively take efforts to enhance and protect agriculture in North County. Now, separate to that would be on the opposite end, what we identify as option Z, which would be for the commission simply to disapprove the proposal without any prejudice. And we put that term without prejudice on purpose because we recognize, in and of itself, I think the applicants have done all what they needed to do under statute and local policy to have a merit proposal. However, we don't live in a fishbowl. There are inactivities outside of Fallbrook and Rainbow. So it would be fair if this was the priority of the commission to say, for external reasons, we just cannot approve this proposal in its impacts on the county water authority. So that would be the opposite end of the spectrum. And then there's this middle ground, or at least what we think is the middle ground, which we've identified as option Y. And that would be for the commission to essentially hit pause and say, you know what, there's too many questions, open-ended questions about how these detachments would impact the county water authority, and by extension, all of you in your cities and the special districts. So we want to first dive into a municipal service review of the county water authority, for, among other reasons, because in the ad hoc work to date, one of the salient comments from Dr. Hammond was to LAFCO, and that was, irrespective of how you look at Fallbrook and Rainbow, the business model of the county water authority produces some angst, i.e. the reliance on water sales to cover fixed costs, with the notion that water sales are also going down, irrespective of the drought, they're going down. So you have this holistic concern noted by Dr. Hammond about the water authority in of itself. And so again, the commission may say, well, let's just hit pause and look at that topic a little more deeply before we tackle the detachment. So option Y, option X, and option Z are the three that we've identified as being reasonable given different policy premises. So I know we have at least one member of the public here in the board chambers today who'd like to address the commission, and then I will rely on Erica and Kayla to identify if there's any speakers online, and they can come right afterwards. But Erica, you can go ahead and call the first speaker.
Tom Kennedy.
So I was just randomly walking down the road, and hey, I'll stop in the county building today. It just happened to be this meeting today. No, actually, I was just here for the Special District Advisory Committee. Tom Kennedy, the General Manager of Pampa Water. Some of you I know, some I don't. But I just wanted to be here to answer any questions you had and thank the staff for the report. It's been 3 years this has been here. 3 years and almost 12,000 pages of documents in the administrative record. And this is one of the reasons I look at option Y and say, why? Why would we wait? We have all the, if we don't, the 12,000 pages of administrative record isn't enough to assess the impact of the water authority. That option is a kind of a non-starter for us. But I think for all of you who are city managers and people who are in the public government business, you can figure this out. The water authority runs a 2-year budget, about $1.9 million roughly. Chris, I think that's in the ballpark right now. No, he keeps track. At least he used to. So every year, $850 million-ish, 150 or so in capital, so it's $700 million operating revenues. The net impact of revenue was $12.5 million on the top end, 10 to 12. That's not 4%, that's 1.5%. So when you look at their operating revenues, they're taking a 1.5 to 2% hit on their operating revenues. I think that's well under. I mean, whenever you try to slice and dice this on customer impact in this way, you look at the numbers a lot of ways. But I know people who run city budgets understand operating revenue and expenses. So 12.5 billion, 700 million, 1.5 to 2%. And so we think that's a fairly small number. Yeah, it's a lot of money, though, right? And we've tried with Water Authority for years now to say, hey, let's sit down and sort this out and come to a mutual agreement. I did not want to leave a burning bag of LAFCO mess on their porch and ring the doorbell and run away. But that's where we find ourselves. And so I think that while an exit fee, is contemplated by LAFCO staff, just as you all know, under the County Water Authority Act, in the law that prescribes how you join the Water Authority, which is how Rainbow joined in 1953, and how you leave. It's all laid out in the statute. In the statute, it says that we pay our share of bonded indebtedness is still on for obligations that are on the tax roll. The Water Authority does have a lot of debt. They've built a lot of projects, and notably the emergency storage project, from which we do not get full service because those pump stations that are described have not been built. We've been paying for it for 25 years. We still don't have a service. This is one of the sore points. But LAFCO has decided that even though the statute says that there are no fees other than bonded indebtedness on the tax roll, they want to bring one up, which, we understand. We want to be fair. Our board, when I started this, before we filed our application, we spent almost a full year trying to negotiate the water. I told them, if you want this to go smoothly, you may have to do something other than what the law says. And so the option where they have an exit fee that we believe is still too large in the way it's constructed by Dr. Hammer. But with appropriate credits, the pump stations, the Water Authority has submitted and has affirmed that it's $40 million, not 21. So I'm sure we'll get the math right on that. They're holding about $250 million in stored water that we help pay for, and our value of that's about $10 million. And then we have our cash reserves, which we're not even asking for back, because we have about $15 million of our cash in their reserves. The large cash reserves, as some of you who know their budgets is. All of you, your member agencies, the cities, and the member other districts in there have been giving extra money to the Water Authority to have these cash reserves, which is prudent. But that's extra money that we put down that we're not getting back. And so we're looking forward to moving forward the process. I know that I read the comments from the last city's advisory committee, and there was discussions about what we should pay in perpetuity and things like that. I don't think that's necessarily appropriate, but we're open to a fair difference being fair. And one of the aspects to conclude here is that for Rainbow, we are an agricultural community. And if you're familiar with up in Rainbow, I think we have 13 signalized intersections. And it's all primarily agricultural use. And it's been under serious stress. We've lost over 1 million trees in the last 15 years, along with the associated carbon capture. But I appreciate that LAFCO and the county have made agriculture a focus. And if they want to do something to help agriculture, as I know Mr. McKinney asked us, I live in Escondido, there's a significant agricultural group in there. The water costs are something we hear about all the time. Every day I hear from a grower about that. So it's putting people out of business. Delaying this another 2 years is going to make even more debt grows. That's it. And we're just trying to do everything we can to preserve not just the character of our community, but what used to be the avocado capital of the world and the Delta highway up there, so that we can have our kids and their kids at least be able to drive through the roads. If they're not, according to the general plan, it's just gonna be hillsides with dead trees, because there will not be houses up there. That's how the general plan works. So with that, I will conclude my comments.
Thank you, John.
And online, we have Mark Haddam.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Mark Haddam, and I'm special counsel for the San Diego County Water Authority. Thank you for the chance to speak. As a quick first note, Mr. Kennedy and Mr. Beebe's earlier comments about what the County Water Authority Act says are completely incorrect. In fact, it does call for payments for all outstanding indebtedness. So there's differences of interpretation, but just wanted you to be aware of that. Second, these reorganizations would harm the majority of the county and shouldn't be recommended by this committee. There are many reasons why, though I covered just a few here. First, all county water ratepayers are being asked to pay for a Fallbrook Rainbow exit. The staff report tries to downplay this by claiming on page 41 that having the rest of the county pay an extra 4.4% per year is, quote, below the one-year inflation rate of 6.4% and therefore reasonably considered insignificant, end quote. This statement is amazing. Most of our county's ratepayers do not believe that 6% inflation is insignificant, or that county ratepayers who already pay for systemic inflation and higher water rates won't care that another 5% is added on top of that inflation so that Rainbow and Fallbrook can leave the county. Though we believe staff's numbers are too low, even on their numbers, your city's ratepayers are being asked to pay an extra $10 to $12 million each and every year for many decades. A short-term exit fee does not solve this problem. You should not bless this subsidy by your ratepayers to Fallbrook and Rainbow. Second, our county's important voting rights at MET will be handed to a Riverside County agency, which has regularly fought against MET rate refunds for your ratepayers. LAFCO staff says on pages 46 and 47 that only 3 MET votes would have changed over the past 10 years, though one of those votes was critical for a new general manager. Staff fails to identify the other 2 votes or detail the recency of the 3 votes. Also, the import of the lost voting rights will be increasing as land values in Fallbrook and Rainbow rise. You should not support losing our county's MET voting rights. Third, the staff report on page 45 quotes LAFCO expert Dr. Hanneman and the Bay Delta Water Master as both saying there would be additional pressure on the Delta. This result would be contrary to expressed state policy in Water Code section 85021. Staff has repeatedly refused to study this critical issue, despite it being called out for over 2 years by the Water Authority. There's been no secret compliance on this and other issues. You should not support any action on these matters without full and proper environmental review. Finally, outside the substantive issues, we were shocked to just learn that Chris Cate, who's a former San Diego City Councilman, Water Authority board member, and LAFCO commissioner, is now working for LAFCO on this matter after he's been directly involved in these very issues with those entities. In response to comments he made earlier at the other meeting today, though he is correct that he did stop going to our closed sessions at a certain point, he was privy to earlier privileged communications on this very matter. This all raises significant ethical issues that we are now examining as we just learned of this relationship. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark, for your comments. Eric or Michaela, any other live?
No written correspondence for item 4B.
Okay, so here we are, city members. This is your opportunity to ask questions, seek clarifications, or in fact, provide your comments on behalf of your member agency. And again, those comments, if the collective majority choose to go down this path, can be put in the form of a formal recommendation or request from the committee itself. So I'm going to make eye contact. Assume someone's going to start us off. Chris Escondido, why don't you start us off? Questions, comments, or if you're good, you're good.
Oh, my mind.
There we go.
So first I want to thank Priscilla for the presentation. That was very informative. Thank you. If you could, I have to admit your discussion on the, I think number 17, determining the effective territory for election purposes. I have to admit, I didn't really understand what your brief comments were getting at. So if you could clarify that a little bit for me.
Sure. So for the election purposes, it has been discussed many times that by the County Water Authority and other member agencies, that the effective territory should be expanded for purposes of an election. So it should include all member agencies. Now, Commission Council can help with this maybe, but it is expressly stated that we cannot expand the territory due to the fact that the County Water Authority applied for non-district status through, and it was approved by the commission. And so then this took away that option. And in CKH, it only provides for the election taking place only within the affected territory of both applicants, but then also provides an option for the commission to expand the territory to include Eastern Municipal Water District. So the comments are saying we cannot expand it to include all member agencies. We can expand it to include Eastern Municipal Water District. That clarifies.
It did, thank you. And if I'm asking,
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
You know, in your presentation, you talked about the requirements for the agency proposing to detach to participate in the CWS bond indebtedness, but also that exit fees were appropriate. I think Mr. Kennedy disputed that, and I just want to kind of understand the nature of that a little bit more. I mean, I have to admit, I'm not completely familiar with it. So can you explain a little bit more about LAFCO staff's position?
Sure. I think on this one, I'm going to ask for a little help from either Kean or Alex.
So two questions that we'll tackle. I'll tackle the wisdom of how we come up with the XCP number, and then I'll ask Alice to discuss our legal authority to do so. But it comes to our deference to Dr. Hammond when he came up with his number based on 2022, that the net revenue loss for the County Water Authority will be $12.581 million. So we took that number and we essentially have created it as somewhat gospel. Like, okay, that's the impact on an annual basis. What then can be discounted? And so there is, well, let me back up. Just coming to that number channels through a little bit of disagreements, right? The County Water Authority is going to say, we have in our report, no, the real net revenue impact on 2022 is more like 17 million. I think Fallbrook and Rainbow said, no, it's closer to 5 million. So our number, again, 12.581, conveniently is in the middle of those two extremes, but it's based on what Dr. Hammond did, based on his math. And there are some projections there, right? So Hammond's report is assuming some important assumptions, but nevertheless, $12.851 million for a period of 5 years. And why is 5 years, ring a bell for us? Because as Priscilla said, okay, well, urban water management plans are 5 years. The working group consists of, among others, a water district general manager, all said, the market for the most part tells a water manager to look at your last 5 years of operating costs and expenses and kind of project out, consistent with the urban water management plan. And then 5 years also speaks to us because every 5 years or so, we do these municipal service reviews. So there is the basis for that 12.581 million number of exit fee on an annual basis for 5 years. We believe that at least that $21 million discount for these pump stations to convey water up to the Fallbrook Rainbow area is an appropriate savings to take away from the exit fee. And that $21 million was identified in the budget of the county water authority back in the fiscal year 2011. As as Tom has mentioned, hey, there are now newer numbers that suggest that the real cost of those pump stations is $30 to $40 million. That could be true. However, we're just relying on what the water authority put down in its budget. And again, it goes back 10 years, but that's the number we're going to roll with, at least for the time being. Last but not least, there is a debate about our authority to impose exit fees. So I'm going to ask Deputy Counsel Alex Garrison to address that.
So LAFCO law is, we refer to it as CKH, the Cortese Oxford. LAFCO law is what governs here. It governs all the organizations that are proposed, that come before the commission. Now, LAFCO law governs unless an exception applies. One of the exceptions that Priscilla noted earlier is if certain districts, not everyone can do this, certain districts, including the water authority and water districts, have the opportunity to exempt themselves as non-district for purposes of proceeding. In this case, the county water authority decided to do that with respect to part 4 of CKH, right? So that has 5 parts. And of the 5 parts, only with respect to part 4, the San Diego County Water Authority decided we want to be exempt. So the commission held a hearing, determined that they are exempt as to part 4. And that's why they don't have to go through, we're not relying on CKH's protest proceedings and election procedures. Instead, we're going to the Principal Act for the San Diego Water Authority because they decided to be exempt under part 4. So we don't use our part 4. Instead, we're using their Principal Act. But part 5 and part 3 talk about exit fees. And so the Principal Act doesn't apply as to what authority the commission has to apply exit fees, because that's governed under part 3 and part 5. In this specific case, just looking at the Principal Act itself, the Principal Act also doesn't say that its exit procedures supersede what CKH says. So if we acknowledge that CKH is the governing law, subject to certain exceptions, and we know that the exceptions don't apply, that gives the commission the authority under CKH, and I will bore you with the citations, but it gives us the authority under CKH to impose certain exit fees. Any questions on this point? Or further clarification?
So, we're going to look around. Any questions, comments from the committee? Chris, Howard, let's go ahead.
Priscilla or Keith, one of you can answer this, I'm sure. I hope. Dr. Hammond recommended the exit fee from 3 to 10 years. You chose 5. Why?
So again, it's a discretionary call. We tied it to urban water management plans being prepared on a 5-year cycle, MSRs, LAFCO's core planning document being prepared on a 5-year cycle. And then the working group itself that was created out of the ad hoc identified 5 years as being an appropriate market barometer for a water provider to determine what are reasonable costs and revenues going forward in the short term. It's discretionary, but it's the number we came to.
Okay, fair, thank you for that.
Chris, any other questions?
Yeah, Mark kind of referenced this with the water authority, the 3 votes. Priscilla, you mentioned the 1 vote for the executive director. The other 2 votes?
Let me ask Adam Wilson if he can speak to. And if not, this will be a long walk back and forth. Let's see it.
And I'm sure this will be, significant or not, depending on your point of view, but I'm curious.
The other 2 votes were related to the chairman and resolution. So immaterial to the appointment of a general manager.
This wasn't discussed at all today, but I can recall this from back from the perspective. Oh, by the way, how is the perpetuity guy? That's, that's on reference earlier, but that's okay. We can understand your point of view, we can understand ours as well. This would ultimately, if it got to that point, require a vote of both Fallbrook and Rainbow ratepayers.
Correct.
Why would it not involve countywide vote?
So-
The entire county would be impacted on it.
So that was a conclusion that council assisted us with. So if you allow for Alex to make the walk again. So the question, why wouldn't the whole county water authority get to vote on this?
Every ratepayer impacted by this.
Right. So going back to CKH, as stated earlier, CKH is the LAFCO law. The LAFCO law gives the commission discretion. The commission can decide it's only going to be the voters of Fallbrook and Rainbow, or it's going to be the entire, all the voters within San Diego County Water Authority. The commission has the discretion. But like I said, early on in this process, the County Water Authority took advantage of an exception to CKH. That exception states that the County Water Authority is not considered a district for purposes of Part 4 of LAFCO law, and Part 4 of LAFCO law deals with elections. So they exempted themselves from our election procedures under LAFCO law. So the commission no longer has that discretion to make that determination. Instead, now we have to look at the County Water Authority's Principal Act. And the County Water Authority's Principal Act is clear. It says for purposes of splitting off from the County Water Authority, a vote has to be taken of the member agencies' voters that are splitting off. And that's why we're limiting it to just the voters in Fallbrook and Rainbow, because that's what the County Water Authority's Principal Act says about this process. And LAFCO at this point has no discretion anymore to make a decision about who gets to vote, because the Water Authority exempted itself from all discretion essentially.
Okay, so third period is saying this, I just want to make sure, because of the previous action by the water authority, you're determining that the commission no longer has discretion on this. It is only Fallbrook and Rainbow that can vote on this.
Per the Principal Act, correct? Yeah.
Okay.
Jonathan with Oceanside.
Yeah, thank you very much. I actually had a follow-up question also regarding the exit fee period. And my question was really more to find out more. I think as you mentioned earlier, and was just mentioned, the range was somewhere between 3 and 10 years, which is obviously, quite a variation. My question is more, what was the basis for the 3 to 10 year range?
So that was drawn from Dr. Hanneman's own professional observation that in his perspective, 3 to 10 years is the appropriate market change for, in this case, a water provider to adjust to the new norm and make adjustments in the short term going forward. So directly from Dr. Hanneman's perspective. Order, Adrian, City of San Diego.
I'm going to follow up on answering the question from the gentleman from Poway. Did I hear correctly that one of the other 2 votes was for the chairperson of that? So you have your general manager and your chair?
Procedural item, the one was procedural vote, and another one was change of agenda. Just, if we could just,
Well, last Tom, if you could get to
yeah, the really only substantive one was the GM. There was a procedural vote a few years back about, and I'm sure maybe Mark Adams this thing here, he's got it too. There was one for an agenda change that Sandy wanted to make that didn't make it through in a narrow vote. And the other one was, I believe, a procedural vote within the general manager's hiring. It was quite a controversy when that happened a couple of years back, as some of you may recall. It is tough, and as those of your city managers, if you get elected by a 50.3% your council, it's a tough spot to be.
Okay, thank you for the clarification, because that alone is massive. That's huge for an organization, but glad to get the clarification. I understand the legal procedure and the Part 4. But it does seem very counterintuitive that all affected entities and ratepayers, which probably encompasses all of the city members around this dais, wouldn't have a say in this process. So I find that challenging. On your option Y, mention an MSR that's incomplete. With all due respect to 1,200 pages of documentation on this issue so far in 3 years. Can LAFCO staff go into any sort of clarification as to what that MSR encompasses and what additional information it might be able to provide?
So the question would be the merits of going down an MSR route for the county water authority and some specific topics we may look at as opposed to the business model.
Yeah, the parallels to that option related to an MSR. LAFCO's been a part of the process for decades prior related to the delivery of fire and emergency medical services to this region. We'll all recall in 2003, the Cedar Fire burst through this region, and it was the first large fire that went from the backcountry and impacted all of you guys at the city. So from a regional standpoint, it caught everybody's attention and highlighted the inefficiencies of the emergency medical and fire delivery services to this region. LAFCO then took the task to form a macro and micro report to look at those inefficiencies, and ultimately that ended up in the culmination of 1.5 million acres of the unincorporated area being consolidated to the county fire authority. So through that parallel, while it may not be a perfect analogy, I think there is some takeaways from that. And also, as Keene indicated through Dr. Hanneman's report, one of the larger takeaways from his, even though he didn't specifically study this, he said the governance and financial model on how the water delivery service business in the region is, there's a red flag there, and perhaps that should be studied and analyzed.
All right, appreciate staff's response, and to me that kind of speaks to the idea that perhaps we don't have the complete picture, and I hate making recommendations when it doesn't seem like the record's complete. I do want to thank staff for the very comprehensive report and 18 different issue areas. That is a massive undertaking, so thank you. Last question I would have is, can staff elaborate on, I thought I heard under item 11 that your consultant referred to this issue of greater reliance on the Big Delta area as a financial gamble. That also sets off a red flag. So can you elaborate on that? I hate to jump on rhetoric, but.
Yeah, so I'll take this, and maybe if staff wants to help out, but the issue that Dr. Hanneman, our consultant through this process, noted, and it had two parts to it. One was, is there, well, actually the lead part was, is there a reliability concern with LAFCO giving the green light for these two North County water districts to change wholesaler providers, and in doing so, essentially become that much more dependent on state water project water, which has to make its way down the Delta. And the comment, it's a fair one by the County Water Authority, is certainly state policy, and there's a letter in our record of these 1,200 pages, comes from the Delta Water Master. I may be getting that title confused, but Water Master is definitely in there, where he provided that the section entitled saying, hey, from going forward, it's the city of California's interest to reduce demands that holistically are going through the Delta. And so the County Water Authority fairly and I think appropriately has flagged this as, well, this is a policy disconnect, LAFCO. You are perhaps greenlighting a reorganization that would have a greater demand on the Delta. Speak to it. And so we punted that question directly to our consultant, who said, well, it's not so much a reliability issue, which I think is what the Delta Water Master is speaking to about the fragility of the levee system and whatnot. It's our consultants' learned understanding that it really is about a financial gamble, in that right now, the setup for these two agencies to receive water through Eastern, which is essentially just conveying water from Met. Met is conveying water from State Water Project from the Colorado. But the issue is, should a time of drought or a levy break of some proportion that disrupts the entire system, the financial model that the applicants are relying on is going to be thrown out the door in some kind of make up as you go, make up a process of figuring out how to get water to make up for the disruption in the Delta is going to just blow the budgets away of these agencies. So all we can say at LAFCO is, it's a gamble. And I'll leave it at that. It is a gamble.
Thank you. I might have additional comments later, but definitely want to hear the rest of the questions.
So going down in order, why don't we get to National City, we'll get back to SPB, and we'll keep going.
Thank you. I echo obviously some of the concerns today just expressed. I did want to thank staff for such a comprehensive report and appreciate all the information that we're getting. My question is on item number 3 of 18, and just if I could understand a little bit better the differences between roll-offs and detachment, and as we go through that, how do we know? Is this coming from a roll-off effort from previous previous efforts, or where did you get that? Whatever information you got for comparing.
So essentially, there's a difference between roll-offs and attachments.
If I understood, sorry, if I understood that one correctly, that you set up some differences between somebody detaching and somebody just rolling off. So just wanted to understand a little bit better what those differences are, and then how do you know? Because I don't recall any agency that's rolled off in the recent past.
So, thank you for the question. So, the basics of detachment versus roll-off. A roll-off would essentially be a member agency of the County Water Authority reducing its water purchases from the County Water Authority. So, if you look at the city of San Diego with the Pure Water Project, you have the East County Advanced Water Purification Projects with their JPA out there and their project, they would reduce their reliance on the County Water Authority. The city of Oceanside has their water purification project as well too. So roll-off in a sense is just reducing your reliance on purchases from the County Water Authority, whereby detachment would essentially be removing the agency for its entirety from the County Water Authority.
No, I get that level of difference. I'm talking about how did you assess, or is there an assessment of the impacts? Because it seems that even though there's a portion that remains, or say they roll off to everything except 1 gallon.
Correct, yeah. So with the roll-off, essentially, those agencies that I just mentioned, the 3 agencies, they would still be member agencies of the County Water Authority, and would thus have some level of fixed costs that they would be paying to the Water Authority, even if they don't purchase 1 molecule of water. There would still be some fixed costs associated with being a part of the agency in of itself. So that level of impact would be determined once you see agencies start reducing their purchase of water, whereby the 2 agencies who detach you would not be providing any type of fixed revenues to the County Water Authority just for simply being a member.
Understood. So there's no list or effort to quantify the impact of a roll-off yet.
There have been some reviews by the County Water Authority is when the agencies begin having their own local supplies, what that dollar impact would be. There have been some level of analysis in that regard for those 3 agencies and the value essentially of reducing their purchases. There would be an impact, yes.
Right, but nothing that you found that could be compared to this detachment.
Not at the moment.
Second check-in with my home city of Escondido.
Sorry, you're gonna be sorry for calling me out first.
So this question about roll-off and detachment, I know it's been a red flag that's been discussed, as Mr. Kay mentioned, at the Water Authority, that their reliance on water sales to cover fixed costs is a problem. I can see why that might be a good thing for LAFCO to study in an MSR. I think what I'm struggling with is, even though I understand why that's, might be a good thing to study, can you help me connect it to why it's a reason to hit pause on this particular question with the detachment of these two agencies?
So, maybe I'll rephrase this. So LAFCO staff is not suggesting that one of the options is let's do an MSR and and as part of that, let's study the difference between detachment and roll-off as the lead topic. It would be one of the topics that would go into an MSR. Governance would go into an MSR. But just because it's been brought up enough over 3 years, it clearly has some material interest to a number of stakeholders. And maybe back to the question from National City, LAFCO staff has not done our own separate standalone analysis of here's where we think the impacts of roll-off are occurring, irrespective of whether these detachments are occurring, and here's the monetary number. Partly, and you would all appreciate this far more than us, there are a lot of variables to that, and it would seem difficult for LAFCO to get any buy-in from our applicants, County Water Authority, and our member agencies as to what are the appropriate assumptions. Maybe we end up doing that in the MSR where we don't have the time constraints of processing the proposal, but right now it seems a bit out of our reasonable reach. So, thank you. Let's hear from Cindy.
So in the vein of the MSR issue that has been brought up by the gentleman, I'd like to know, does the MSR similar to a sphere of influence require an environmental assessment?
So, no, so an MSR, at least the way we have been doing in San Diego are tied directly to information gathering. And yeah, there are recommendations, but there are recommendations like a budget. So there's nothing that fundamentally goes beyond the categorical exemption, whatever that may be. Maybe it's just the general rule that there is no impact here. Now, if we get to the point of doing an MSR, and this happens, and we immediately conclude some rather significant changes need to be done, not just about the sphere, but we've done this with agencies who say some fundamental governance breakup needs to occur, or some kind of reforming. Well, then that certainly is subject to CEQA review, and most likely, there's probably some room to wiggle there beyond any categorical exemption. So the CEQA component of an MSR is pretty much it's an informational document, but what the MSR may trigger going forward could lead to CEQA work if we're dealing with a formal, like this holistic rethinking.
And I think that's our concern, the environmental determination for the project, because it isn't part of this typical sphere of influence environmental analysis that would be part of the documentation for us to make an informed decision. So based on the categorical exemption, there's no study on the physical impacts to the environment the project may have. For example, Rainbow, it's incumbent on the Rainbow Municipal Water District to have that sort of environmental analysis to demonstrate that the lack of a detachment action may have an impact on fallowing and agriculture. That's a direct physical impact. On the contrary, we would also want to see, if the detachment would result in additional changes in the network of conveyance for the water system. Is there additional pumping? Does that equate to additional greenhouse gas emissions? We just don't have that full environmental analysis to make this determination at this point in time.
Fair enough, and just because it's a material comment, thank you for raising it. So in the proposals, the lead agency is Baldwick and Rainbow, and they have both independently cited a class 20 categorical exemption, and in that class 20 exemption, it says essentially, paraphrasing somewhat literally, that if it's a like-for-like change, where you're going from one governmental setup to another, that the state in its wisdom says no more review, you're good, you can cite that exemption. As responsible agencies, so our task is it reasonable? Are there any exceptions to the exception where we think, hey, something else should be looked at? I will offer up that my own professional take is, no, I think the class 20 exemption does apply, and it's something we do quite a bit. For example, when we annex or dissolve recently at our last meeting, a timely example, we dissolved the Borrego Fire Protection District, and we concurrently annexed it into the county the county fire protection district. And we did so based on a class 20 exemption, and the same logic applies. There is not a new service power being introduced to the affected territory. It's simply a change in who is exercising that service power. So I know that there is a good argument to make that maybe additional reviews needed.
Is that the case that normally with the sphere of influence expansion, as would be the case for the Eastern Water District? Because they're currently not in the sphere of influence, right, with the Eastern
Yes.
Water District.
But the service,
So normally, as part of expansion of cities or any special district boundaries, there'd have to be some sort of environmental study associated with that change in the sphere of influence.
well, not always. If the city of Santee were to seek, annexation of an area that is already developed, already has services from one or two special districts, we very well may conclude that the expansion is captured under class 20 because all of the core services, water, fire protection, law enforcement, are already being provided at a equivalent level. And so we would, at least I would, use the class 20. Now, it is a discretionary call, and I have no doubts your topics will be addressed by some of the commissioners who might say something similar like, hey, maybe the exception to the exemption applies. So fair comment, certainly. Thank you. Let's go to Imperial Beach.
And you may have answered this earlier, and this for option Y, the service review for the county. What's the schedule for that?
So that is currently in the queue. It has been held up until we complete, or at least complete in the sense of the commission taking some action on the dais of all of our rainbow proposals. As another item on your agenda, it is once again in our to-do list for the upcoming work plan. So it's in the queue, but it has been administratively paused until the commission tells us to go forward. We want to first address the applicant's request.
And can that queue be moved?
Yes, by the commission.
Okay, that's my next question.
You should love this stuff.
Coronado.
Coronado.
That's
That's okay. Yeah, hi. First, I really do want to thank Ms. Mumpower for your presentation and your great analysis. I really enjoyed reading the report, and it was very helpful. So I have a few questions. One is, I think I echo a lot of the same questions about the MSR that I've heard from my colleagues here about this. Just wondering, we're in the business of liking information, making as complete decisions as we can. And so it was very helpful to hear about that. And I would add to that, I think that you understand the motivation of the applicants to want to find a lower cost water provider, and yet there are also a lot of implications and externalities across the county. So I think in making such a decision is very helpful to take the time, notwithstanding, I know maybe some impatience, but to take the time. So I would just echo some of the comments Rosie you mentioned up here. And I had another question. This is my first time sitting at this sort of conversation, and we went through a lot of different factors. So are they weighted at all? I mean, it seems like we went through them all one by one, and as you're producing these recommendations, you weight them differently, but do you see a higher value on any of them relative to others?
Wonderful question. So yes, I think they are weighted. Staff has their own weighting system to a degree. The commission certainly does. The commission will obviously have the final say. But in terms of financial impacts, relevance to agriculture, and frankly, the discount, I would offer up as being, the ones that come immediately to mind as, okay, what is the core things we have to address? And then the others, all important, I think, feed into that financial impact, impact on agriculture. And I don't want to discount, I do not want to discount what Adrian City San Diego said. There's gonna be a voting impact on the county water authority. As we, I think, put in the footnote, we initially attempted to mitigate that through some cleverness at staff and Med and San Diego County Water Authority. They all bonded over saying, well, we can't do that, knock it off LAFCO. So we just dropped it. So all we can do at this point is acknowledge, over the last 10 years, one, in our mind, material vote came in within this margin, so it's somewhat of a black swan, right? But it nevertheless showed up. So how does the commission deal with that going forward? I think Mr. Haddon is correct that votes are probably going to be closer going forward than they have in the past. So that's also fair to consider.
And just to follow up on that, so is that weighting in the Port Authority, or is that meaning the commission's just sense that these are the principles or the values that we uphold?
Yeah, so that will be a discussion on the dais of how they ultimately prioritize their take on this.
Okay, and the final question, we can move on, and the representative from Rainbow just stepped out, and that would be more appropriate for him, but I absolutely recognize the motivation to try to find a lower cost water provider. But I wonder if they discussed with LAFCO other opportunities they may have to try to lower the cost burden or have more efficient water delivery to their customers or other mechanisms. Was that part of the analysis?
So that was not part of the analysis. So there's two answers to that. One is there is some history to this. So a few years ago, there was a consolidation effort where Fallbrook and Rainbow, and I believe Fallbrook was petitioning to take over Rainbow, so it was a contested consolidation. LAFCO staff said, yeah, let's do it. The commission said no. So that is context to this. The commission is on record saying they don't believe the merits of the consolidation and what we thought was going to be about $2.5 million of savings in the year 2015 is merited. So that's context. And then the other part is part of our understanding, again, Tom or Mark can speak to this more. There was a concerted negotiation behind the scenes between the parties, and for whatever reason, it just never produced anything. And just to reference, Jack Eby, who's the general manager at Fallbrook in our meeting this morning, put it pretty bluntly. He said the relationship's broken, which was our signal saying, okay, they're done with any of us trying to encourage discussions. So let's go over here, Encinitas, Chula Vista, Carlsbad.
And then questions.
Thank you so much. Chula Vista.
Would like to again thank staff for the very thoughtful report and presentation, and would just echo the concerns of the gentleman from Santee on the lack of environmental analysis with this action. So I think that's something that I'd like to see.
Okay. Ask Carlsbad.
Thank you, and echo everyone else with regard to any staff really appreciate the information that was provided. I did have a question with regards to a comment that was made by Mr. Kennedy earlier with regards to the cash reserves not being incorporated as part of the analysis. Could you maybe touch on that?
Well, I could, but I think Chris Kate would do a better job as to why at this point we did not focus in on the percentages of impact relative to cash reserves.
So one of the comments from this morning's meeting as well too was looking at the potential net impact of detachments on each member agencies. What we provided was more of a gross, not knowing what other factors go in there to determine what that net impact would be, whether it's the cost of the emergency storage project. Mr. Kennedy brought up past contributions to projects through their debt service payments as an agency, the dollars that exist in the rate stabilization fund. He also brought up the actual amount of water that's being stored at San Vicente as an example, the contribution to that. So all of those other factors were not brought into the equation to determine what the actual net impact is, but something that was asked of whether that is a potential analysis that can be done, and we're going to be evaluating that.
So the answer is,
No.
I don't have the answer.
Yeah, we're potentially looking at it, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Del Mar and Solana Beach.
Thank you. I'll be really quick. I want to echo my colleagues and thank you staff for a really detailed presentation. This is my first LAFCO meeting. I'm kind of new to this issue, but it was very interesting to dig into it, and I appreciate the questions from some of my colleagues that have maybe dug into this a little bit more. I learned a lot. I did have some questions that have already been asked about the exit fee and the timing, kind of the assumptions behind that, so I really appreciate staff's answers to those. So I don't have anything to add at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Solana Beach.
I too would echo those comments. Thank you. I would also like to, I guess, apologize for not being more heavily involved in these prior discussions and also for walking in late. But thanks for the clarification shout out. I had a couple comments and then some questions. You know, obviously, I don't begrudge Fallbrook and Rainbow for looking at options to reduce their costs. If I was looking at was it a 23.3% reduction annually or a 22.2% reduction annually, I'd be jumping at the chance. But what I have to look at, and so regionally, I'm torn between this regional approach to, hey, let's all work together and spread this cost if this is going to happen, with my city manager hat, which is looking at my own, well, you know, benefit to my own community. And I know my council is going to ask me to do that. So there's a table on page 40 of the staff report that shows the estimated detachment impacts to different districts. We're represented in Solana Beach, or we're served by Santa Fe irrigation and a very tiny portion by Lebanese. And I note that while I think the staff report mentions de minimis impacts in terms of rate, and when you look at this and it may look small, but the thing that piqued my interest is that those two districts have the highest annual impact. While small, this is underscored by in our area, we just lost Lake Hodges, that's a local source of water. So that's having a huge impact on our rate payers. We're going to be looking at over the next 2 years an 8.5% increase for our rate payers. So when you add this to that, it's a piling on effect. And so while I'm being a little myopic here, I guess the question I had about this table is, what are we looking at? Is this an average 4,500 cubic feet per month bill? What is this? Who does this impact? Because I don't know that it impacts. The other interest I have is we spend a lot on water, and so municipal costs are going to go up. So what is this table reflecting?
So with deference to staff to help me if I misspeak, the table that you're looking at ultimately is households, or at least households by way of measurement of equivalent heated units. So that could be a 4-person house. It could be, you know, a commercial structure with a number of tenants. So it's based on a PMU count. We had some other measurements based on capita or even connections. This seemed to be the best and seemed to align with the County Water Authority's own way of how they kind of contemplate the distribution of costs to their entities.
That helps. And then how are these, this might be a more technical question, and maybe I can get into it with staff later. How are these allocated? It says annual share. How's that share allocated? I mean, it strikes me as odd that the two districts that I'm asked to speak on behalf of have the highest increases for both for 1 year.
So essentially what the annual share represents is that we took a 5-year average of the dollar contribution to each of these agencies, and then took the annual amounts of that over a 5-year period, between 2017 to 2021. So took the 5 years, totaled them up, divided by 5 to get the annual average, and then looked at that, narrowed it down, divided by the per EMU amount. So this is just one way to look at it. Part of my earlier question to Ms. Gomez is doing more of a net analysis of what that would look like. Part of that would depend on how the County Water Authority essentially taking the, again, assuming everything falls in line, a payment is made for an exit fee, what the County Water Authority does with that exit fee contributions from the two agencies. Do they divvy them up amongst the member agencies? Do they keep it? So there's a number of assumptions that have to be made to try to get that actual net calculation, how it would directly impact a retail rate payer down to your individual city, individual repairs. So those are things that we're trying to further analyze to get a better, clearer picture for everybody.
I guess I just, the final comment I would have is, we haven't really dived into this only in the last day or two. Frankly, my apologies for that. Is that I wouldn't necessarily be prepared to advocate for an option at this point. I just, one, I think I feel an obligation to report back to my council members now on the board of AFCO as well as the rest of my council. So, but I do appreciate this information. It's, I know the amount of work that goes into these things, and I appreciate the staff for that.
Well, thank you so much. Adrian will close us up.
Yeah, I have just a very, very fast question. I know we're 4 minutes over our hard stop, so I'd like to move this along with a recommendation on the motion. How did the special districts make a recommendation?
They did not.
Okay. I'll make a motion that this advisory body, because this is just an advisory body to the commission, recommend option C. We'll see where that goes.
And just for the benefit of clarifying, since we didn't use the phrase C.
I'm sorry, Z. This is the opposed option.
Okay.
And I would also just ask that for the purposes of the record, if you wouldn't mind including Mayor Talgloria's position letter from November 30th, 2022, which outlines his position on this.
Okay, give me 1 second. So we have a motion by a member from San Diego to proceed with option Z. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Howard. So we're going to go ahead, unless there's any additional discussion on the motion. Seeing none, is there any, before I do that, just a wrap a bow on this, is there any comments or people that we did not get to online?
There's no other comments, but Mark Haddon has his hand raised.
Very good. Alice, can you take a comment from the public? Motion?
It's the moderator's.
Mr. Haddon, you have our attention. Please proceed.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to address a couple of questions that the commission had, and also note that I guess Mr. Simons noted that there were 18 weighting issues that staff used. I would hope that that would be in the ultimate report to the commission as to what how the weighting was being done. But a couple quick points. I know a number of you asked about this voting issue, and LAFCO Council expressed their view. I just want you to be aware, we disagree with that. What the County Water Authority did is exempt itself out of Part 4. Part 4 is a very onerous protest that requires 25% of the electorate to file written protest before there's any kind of election, okay? And by law, we were allowed to exempt ourselves out of that. We did not exempt ourselves out of Part 5, and Part 5 allows LAFCO, if it wants to, it's not required to expand the voting. So that's one issue that we disagree on, obviously. The second issue is on the discussion of the Delta. The issue on the Delta is not whether an earthquake will shut somebody off. That's a separate issue, the earthquake issue. The issue on the Delta is the state has expressed a policy that agencies, all the local agencies, are supposed to reduce reliance on the Delta, not increase it. And what's being done here is there's an attempt in these reorganizations to actually increase reliance on the Delta, which is what Dr. Hanlon said and the water master. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. So we're going to proceed unless there's any discussion on the motion with a, here we're going to do a roll call. We'll be official about it. So Erica, will be kind enough to go into order by agency name, either yay, no, or abstain. So Erica, please proceed.
Carlsbad,
Aye.
Chula Vista,
Aye.
Coronado,
Aye.
Del Mar,
Aye.
Encinitas,
Aye.
Escondido,
No.
Imperial Beach,
Yes.
National City,
Yes.
Oceanside,
Abstain.
Poway,
Yes.
San Diego,
Yes.
Santee,
Yes.
Solana Beach,
I abstain.
so we have 10 in favor, 1 opposed, 2 abstain, the motion passes.
So thank you, committee, for that, and that will be conveyed directly onto the commission when this item comes up. Yes, Chris?
If I could make a comment about my
Please.
no vote, I'd like to explain that. I want to be clear that my no vote on option Z, as in Z, is not necessarily support for option X. I would have supported option Y.
Clarification. So again, thank you for your careful consideration of this item. So for the benefit of time, I am going to pass over the discussion of 4C as the review of our work plan and budget. What I will do is staff will send out an email just clarifying what the core items are of the work plan and the budget. And then perhaps if it's agreeable as individual cities, certainly feel free to comment to LAFCO staff. I think we have this on our May 1st meeting for the commission. So any email comments or written comments otherwise that you want to provide to us, perhaps the second and final week of June would be most appreciated. And then in the spirit of reciprocity, I'll skip my executive officer report if you skip your committee reports. There it is. And then last but not least, can we just check? I don't see anyone in the chambers, but is anyone online who just wanted open expression?
No comments.
Very good. So we're going to call this meeting to adjourn, and thank you all for your time.